Last Tuesday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and my bank account drained to zero. The person who did this wasn't some stranger from the internet. It was Dylan, my younger brother, the same person I'd been secretly sending $3,000 to every month for the past 2 years. The same person who posted on LinkedIn about his thriving tech startup and drove a BMW he claimed he'd earned through smart investments. The same person who, 3 hours after hacking into my OnlyFans account, sent me a single text message that read, "We need to talk, now." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What he discovered that night changed everything. Not just between us, but about who I really was, who he really was, and what family actually means when the masks finally come off. The coffee maker was still gurgling when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. I'd been living in this small 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe for 8 months now, ever since I'd finally saved enough to move out of the cramped studio downtown. The morning light filtered through my blackout curtains, casting everything in that golden Arizona glow that made even my mismatched furniture look intentional. I reached for my phone expecting maybe a notification from one of my regular subscribers or a text from Natalie about our lunch plan. Instead, I saw Dylan's name flashing across the screen. My stomach dropped immediately. My brother never called this early. Dylan was the type who rolled out of bed at noon and called it optimizing his circadian rhythm for peak performance. The call went to voicemail. Then, another. Then, by the 4th missed call, my hands were shaking as I finally answered. Alexis. His voice was different. Flat, cold. Not the usual cocky tone he used when he wanted something, which was typically money disguised as a temporary investment opportunity in whatever project he was pretending to work on that month. Dylan? What's wrong? Is Mom okay? Dad? Meet me at Copper Moon Cafe in an hour. Don't bring anyone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a full minute, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Dylan had never spoken to me like that. Ever. Even when we were kids and he got caught stealing from my piggy bank, he'd charm his way out of trouble with jokes and that lopsided grin that made our parents forget why they were mad. I threw on jeans and an oversized sweater, tied my dark hair into a messy bun, and grabbed my key. The drive to Copper Moon usually took 15 minutes, but I made it in 10, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Maybe he'd gotten arrested. Maybe he owed money to dangerous people. Maybe his startup had finally collapsed and he needed me to bail him out again. What I didn't expect was to find him already there, sitting in the corner booth we used to claim during high school when we'd skip last period together. He looked pale, almost gray, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it all night. I slid into the booth across from him, studying his face. "Okay, you're scaring me. What's going on?" Dylan looked up at me, and for the first time in years I saw something in his eyes I didn't recognize. Shame, maybe. Or he pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between us, screen facing up. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, "and I need you to tell me the truth." "Okay. Are you Alexis Angel 47? The blood drained from my face so fast I thought I might faint. Alexis Angel 47 was my OnlyFans username, the account I'd built over the past 3 years, the one that had allowed me to pay for my graphic design degree, cover my rent, help our parents with their mortgage when Dad's real estate business struggled, and yet send Dylan money every month when he came to me with his sob stories about startup costs and networking events. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, but my voice cracked. Dylan's jaw clenched. "Don't lie to me, Alexis. Please, not now." He tapped his phone screen, and there it was. My OnlyFans profile, my photos, my videos, my private messages with subscribers. Everything. "How did you—" I couldn't finish the sentence. My throat felt like it was closing. "Your laptop," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Last month when I came over to work on my pitch deck, you left it open when you went to take that phone call from Dad." I saw you had the site open in another tab. I thought it was funny at first, like maybe you were judging someone or doing research for one of your design projects, but then I saw the username. I felt sick. You've been spying on me for a month. I logged in last night using your saved passwords. I had to know for sure. He finally looked at me directly. Alexis, do you have any idea how much money you make from this? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. Of course I knew. Every payment, every tip, every private message request. I tracked it all in a spreadsheet that I updated religiously. It was my business, my livelihood, my independence. That's none of your concern, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. $67,000, Dylan continued, as if I hadn't spoken. In the last 6 months alone. And that's just what I could see from the payout history. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Instead, I forced myself to stay seated and meet his gaze. What do you want, Dylan? I want to know why my sister, who makes more in a month than most people make in a year, has been living like she's broke. I want to know why you drive that beat-up Honda when you could afford a Tesla. I want to know why you shop at thrift stores and eat ramen for dinner. Because it's my money and I can spend it however I want. But you don't spend it, Dylan said, his voice rising slightly. That's what I don't understand. I went through everything, Alex. Your bank statements, your transfer history, everything. You live like you make minimum wage, but you've been sending enormous amounts of money to other people. My stomach lurched. You hacked my bank account too? You used the same password for everything. Mom's maiden name plus the year we moved to Phoenix. He leaned forward. $3,000 a month to me, $2,000 to mom and dad, $1,000 to various charities, $500 to that woman Natalie for her medical bills. You've been giving away almost everything you earn. I felt exposed in a way that went beyond having my OnlyFans account discovered. He'd seen everything, every transfer, every sacrifice, every time I'd chosen to help someone else, instead of treating myself to something nice. You had no right, I whispered. Maybe not, but I had to understand. Because for 2 years, I've been telling everyone about my successful startup. I've been posting on social media about my business wins and my investment strategies. I bought a BMW. I moved into that loft downtown. I've been living like I'm some kind of entrepreneur success story. He paused, running his hands through his hair again. But it's all been fake, hasn't it? Everything I have, everything I've achieved. It's all been funded by my sister selling photos and videos to strangers on the internet. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true, and because I heard something in his voice that I'd never heard before. Genuine remorse. I didn't know, he continued. I swear to you, Alexis, I didn't know where the money was coming from. When you started helping me out, you said you'd gotten a promotion at the design firm. You said you were doing freelance work on the side. I believed you because I wanted to believe you. It wasn't a lie. I said quietly. I do freelance work. The design firm did give me more responsibility, but that's not where most of the money comes from. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so simple, but the answer was complicated. I looked around the coffee shop, at the college students studying for exams, and the business people having meetings over latte. Normal people living normal lives, not sitting in a cafe discussing OnlyFans accounts and family financial secrets. Because you would have judged me, I said finally. Just like you're judging me now. I'm not judging you. Yes, you are. You keep saying selling photos to strangers on the internet like it's something shameful, like I'm doing something wrong. Dylan was quiet for a long moment. Is it wrong? Is what wrong? Working? Making money? Using my body and my creativity to build a business that lets me support myself and help the people I love. I felt anger starting to replace the fear and shame. Because that's what this is, Dylan. It's work, it's a business, and I'm good at it. But you could do other things. Your talent, your graphic design work is amazing. I do other things. This is just one of them, and it happens to be the most profitable. I leaned back in the booth, Do you know how many hours I spend on content creation, on marketing, on building relationships with my subscribers? It's not just taking a few photos and cashing checks, it's a full-time job. And I'm my own boss. Dylan nodded slowly, like he was trying to process this perspective. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. They see sex work and they think it's either exploitative or easy money. It's neither. It's work that requires skill, creativity, business sense, and emotional intelligence, just like any other service industry. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us staring at his phone on the table. Finally, Dylan spoke again. I need to pay you back. What? All of every dollar. I'm going to get a real job and pay you back everything. I shook my head. Dylan, that's not why I told you this. I don't want the money back, but it's your money. You earned it. And I took it under false pretenses. I gave it to you because I love you, because you're my brother, and I wanted to help you succeed. I reached across the table and touched his hand. The fact that I didn't tell you how I earned it doesn't change why I gave it to you. But what if I had known? What if I had known from the beginning that every dollar came from your OnlyFans account? Would I have taken it? That was the question I'd been afraid he'd ask, because I knew the answer. And I knew he knew it too. No, I said quietly. You wouldn't have taken it, and that's exactly why I didn't tell you. Dylan pulled his hand away and buried his face in his palms. God, Alexis, what kind of person does that make me? It makes you human. It makes you someone who has complicated feelings about sex work, like most people in our society. It doesn't make you a bad person, but I've been lying to everyone. My friends, my girlfriend, Mom and Dad, they all think I'm some kind of business prodigy, so tell them the truth. He looked up at me sharply. What? Tell them the truth. Tell them you've been struggling, that you've been receiving help from family, that you're working on building something real. You don't have to mention my OnlyFans account. Just be honest about where you actually are in your life, but then everyone will know I'm a fraud. You're not a fraud. You're a 24-year-old guy who's trying to figure out his career and had help from his sister. That's not shameful. That's family. Dylan was quiet again, but I could see him thinking, process, maybe for the first time in years, actually considering who he really was versus who he'd been pretending to be. There's something else, he said eventually. What? He hesitated, then pulled up another screen on his phone. When I was going through your account last night, I saw some of your messages with subscribers. There are some guys who are intense, like scary intense. My stomach dropped again. What do you mean? One guy has been messaging you constantly for weeks. He's trying to find out where you live. Another one has been making threats because you didn't respond to his messages fast enough. Dylan's jaw tightened. Alexis, some of these men think they own you because they pay for your content. I sighed. This wasn't news to me. Dealing with overly attached or aggressive subscribers was part of the job. Unfortunately, I had systems in place, boundaries I maintained, and I'd gotten good at identifying red flags early. I can handle it, I said. Can you? Because this one guy, username, deleted 4847, he's been sending you messages for 3 months. He knows you live in Tempe. He knows you go to Copper Moon Cafe. He knows you drive a Honda Civic. The blood drained from my face again. I'd noticed that subscribers' messages getting more personal lately, but I hadn't realized he'd been gathering that much information about me. Show me, I said. Dylan handed me his phone and I scrolled through the messages. At first, they seemed like typical subscriber interaction. Compliments on my content, requests for specific types of photos, tips with sweet messages attached. But as I scrolled down to the more recent exchanges, I could see the shift Dylan was talking about. I know you're reading this even though you're not responding. I saw you at that coffee place again today. You looked beautiful in that blue sweater. Why are you ignoring me? I've been supporting you for months. I deserve better treatment than this. I could go to any girl, but I choose you. Maybe I should come introduce myself in person, since you won't talk to me online. I handed the phone back to Dylan, my hands shaking slightly. I'll block him. You should do more than that. You should report him to the police. For what? He hasn't actually threatened me with violence yet, Dylan said. But this is stalking behavior, Alexis. This isn't just a creepy customer. This is someone who's escalating. I knew he was right, but the idea of involving the police made me nervous. What if they judged me for the work I did? What if they didn't take it seriously because I was a sex worker? What if somehow my parents found out about everything? I'll handle it, I repeated, but with less conviction this time. We'll handle it, Dylan corrected. This is partly my fault. If I hadn't hacked your account, I wouldn't have seen these messages, and you might not have realized how serious this situation is getting. It's not your fault that some men don't understand boundaries. No, but it's my fault that I've been taking your money while judging the work you do to earn it. It's my fault that I've been so wrapped up in my fake success story that I haven't been checking in with you about your actual life. I looked at my brother across the table, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. The little boy who used to defend me on the playground when other kids made fun of my thick glasses. The teenager who drove me to school every morning, even though it meant he had to wake up earlier. The young man who had somehow gotten lost in social media personas and startup fantasies, but was still underneath it all, someone who cared about me. Dylan, I said quietly, I need you to delete everything. What? All the screenshots you took, any photos you saved, any information you copied, I need you to delete all of it, and promise me you'll never access my accounts again. He nodded immediately. Of course, I'm sorry I violated your privacy like that. I was just so confused and, I know, but this has to be the end of it. My business, my finances, my personal life, that's all off limits from now on. If you want to know something about my life, you ask me directly. Agreed. And if you need money in the future, you ask me directly too. No more stories about startup costs or networking events. Just be honest about what you need and why. Dylan winced. I don't want your money anymore, Alexis. Not until I can pay back what I already owe you. That's your choice. But the offer stands, because that's what family does. We help each other. The difference is, now we do it honestly. We left the coffee shop that morning with an understanding that felt both new and familiar. Dylan drove me back to my apartment, and we sat in his BMW, the car I now knew I'd helped pay for, talking about what came next. I'm going to look for a real job, he said, something stable while I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. That sounds smart. And I'm going to tell Melissa the truth, about the money, about the startup that doesn't exist, about everything. Melissa was his girlfriend of 8 months. A marketing coordinator at a tech company, who thought Dylan was her entrepreneurial equal. I'd met her a few times at family gatherings, and she seemed sweet but definitely impressed by Dylan's supposed business success. What if she leaves you? I asked. Then she wasn't the right person for me anyway. He paused. I'd rather be alone and honest than in a relationship built on lies. I squeezed his shoulder. She might surprise you. Some people are more understanding than you think. Like you, I've had 3 years to get comfortable with my choices. You've had 3 hours. The fact that you're handling this as well as you are gives me hope. That afternoon, I spent several hours updating my security settings, blocking username deleted 4847, and 2 other subscribers who had been pushing boundaries, and researching online safety protocols for content creators. Dylan had been right about the stalking behavior, and I couldn't afford to ignore it anymore. I also called Natalie and asked if she wanted to come over for dinner. I needed to talk to someone who knew about my OnlyFans work and could help me process everything that had happened. Natalie arrived at 7 with Thai takeout and wine, took one look at my face, and said, "Okay, spill." What happened? I told her everything, about Dylan discovering my account, about him hacking my bank statements, about the stalker subscriber, about our conversation at the coffee shop. Natalie listened without interrupting, occasionally making supportive noises, or refilling my wine glass. "So how do you feel about all of it?" she asked when I finished. "Honestly, relieved. Relieved. I've been carrying this secret for 3 years, pretending to my family that I'm barely scraping by when I'm actually doing well financially, pretending that my graphic design work pays enough to cover my rent and my car and help everyone else with their bills. It's exhausting, keeping track of all the lies." "They weren't really lies," Natalie pointed out. "You just didn't tell them about one aspect of your income, but it's the biggest aspect. It's like 80% of what I make." "That's a pretty significant omission." Natalie nodded thoughtfully.
Are you going to tell your parents? That was the question I'd been avoiding all day. My parents were conservative people who'd raised Dylan and me with traditional values. They weren't cruel or judgmental, but they definitely wouldn't understand or approve of sex work. The money I'd been sending them each month had helped them keep their house when Dad's real estate business struggled during the pandemic. They thought it came from my graphic design success and my wise investing. I don't know. I admit, part of me wants to be completely honest with everyone now, but part of me thinks it would hurt them more than help them. What would hurt them? Knowing that their daughter is successful and independent, or knowing that she works in an industry they don't understand? Both, probably. Well, you don't have to decide tonight. You've already made the big breakthrough with Dylan.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Everything else can wait until you're ready. She was right, but I could feel something shifting inside me, a desire for authenticity that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since I'd started my OnlyFans account, I was imagining what it would be like to live without hiding such a significant part of my life. That night, after Natalie left, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started writing. Not content for my OnlyFans account, but something else. Something that felt important. To anyone who's ever felt like they had to hide their success because other people wouldn't understand how they earned it, I began. I wrote for 2 hours about secrecy and shame, about supporting family members while hiding your own accomplishments, about the complexity of sex work in a society that simultaneously consumes it and condemns it. I wrote about Dylan's reaction and our conversation, about the relief of being seen and accepted by someone who mattered to me. When I finished, I had a 1,500-word essay that felt more honest than anything I'd written in years. I saved it in a folder labeled "Maybe Someday" and closed my laptop. 2 days later, Dylan texted me to say he'd gotten a job interview at a digital marketing agency. Real salary, real benefits, real work, he wrote. Wish me luck. I wished him luck and meant it, but I also knew that luck had nothing to do with what happened in that coffee shop. What happened there was two people choosing honesty over comfort, truth over convenience. What happened there was the beginning of something new between us, something built on reality instead of pretense. I didn't know it yet, but that conversation was also the beginning of something much bigger, something that would challenge not just Dylan's fake success story, but my own hidden life, my family's assumptions, and my own understanding of what it meant to be proud of the work I did. The stalker messages would escalate. My parents would find out the truth in the worst possible way. Dylan's girlfriend would have her own surprising reaction to his confession, and I would have to make some of the hardest decisions of my life about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live. But for those 2 days after the coffee shop, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. The peace that comes from being truly known by someone who loves you anyway. It wouldn't last long, but it was enough to remind me what I was fighting for. The notification sound from my phone cut through the quiet morning like a knife. I'd been awake since 5, sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at the screenshots I'd taken of news and deleted for 3 days had passed since my conversation with Dylan at Copper Moon Cafe, and the stalker's behavior had gotten worse. Good morning, beautiful. I know you're awake. I can see your kitchen light on from here. My blood turned to ice water. I jumped up from the counter so fast my chair toppled backward, hitting the tile floor with a crash that echoed through my apartment. With shaking hands, I pulled the blinds shut and double-checked that my front door was locked. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same account. Don't hide from me, Alexis. We both know this conversation is overdue. I called Dylan immediately, not caring that it was barely 7 in the morning. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with sleep, but instantly alert when he heard the panic in my voice. He's outside, I whispered, as if speaking too loudly might somehow make the situation worse. The subscriber I told you about. He's outside my apartment right now. How do you know? He sent me a message saying he can see my kitchen light. Dylan, he knows where I live. He's been watching me. Okay, listen to me. Call the police right now. I'm getting dressed and I'll be there in 10 minutes. What if they don't take it serious? What if they ask questions about my work? Alexis, this is stalking. This is criminal behavior. They have to take it seriously. I could hear him moving around, probably throwing on clothes and grabbing his keys. Call them now. Stay away from the windows. I'm coming. The police arrived before Dylan did. 2 officers, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, and a younger man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Officer Martinez, the woman, sat with me at my kitchen table while her partner checked the perimeter of my building. Can you show me the messages? She asked, her voice professional but not unkind. I hesitated for only a moment before handing over my phone. I'd made the decision to call them, which meant I had to be prepared for them to see everything. Officer Martinez scrolled through the messages, her expression growing more serious with each screenshot. How long has this been going on? About 3 months, but it's gotten much worse in the past week. The messages used to be more transactional. Now they're personal, threatening, and this is through an OnlyFans account? There it was. The question I'd been dreading. I waited for the judgment, the dismissal, the suggestion that this was somehow my fault for doing sex work in the first place. Yes, I said quietly. Officer Martinez nodded and continued taking notes. Have you blocked this user? I blocked him yesterday, but he created a new account and found me again within hours. Do you have any idea who this person might be? Anyone in your personal life who might have access to your work schedule or daily routines? I shook my head. I'm very careful about keeping my personal life separate from my work. I use a stage name. I never give out personal information. I don't meet subscribers in person. But he knows your real name. He knows where you live and work. That suggests either you've shared more information than you realize, or he's been doing some serious investigation into your identity. The thought made me sick. I'd been so careful, or at least I thought I had been. I used a box for any mail related to my OnlyFans account. I never posted photos that showed identifying features of my apartment or neighborhood. I'd even been careful about the clothes I wore in my content versus what I wore in public. Officer Martinez's partner returned from his perimeter check. No sign of anyone suspicious outside right now, but I found something you should see. He led us to my living room window, the one that faced the parking lot. On the windowsill outside, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was a small piece of paper wedged under the corner of the window frame. Don't touch it, Officer Martinez said, pulling on latex gloves. She carefully extracted the paper and unfolded it. For Alexis, your secret admirer. The handwriting was neat, controlled. Somehow that made it more frightening than if it had been erratic or messy. This person was organized, methodical. We're going to dust this for prints, Officer Martinez said. And I want you to start documenting everything. Every message, every interaction, any time you feel like you're being watched or followed. Keep a detailed log with dates and times. Dylan arrived just as the officers were finishing their report. I could see the relief on his face when he spotted the police cars, followed immediately by anger when Officer Martinez explained what they'd found. How long has this been going on without you telling anyone? He demanded after the officers left. I handled it the way I handle everything else related to my work, privately. This isn't about your work, Alexis. This is about your safety. My work and my safety are connected in ways you're just starting to understand. I sat down heavily on my couch, suddenly exhausted. Do you think this would be happening if I sold insurance or worked at a bank? Dylan was quiet for a moment. Maybe not. But that doesn't mean it's your fault. I know it's not my fault, but it is my reality. This is part of what comes with doing sex work, Dylan. The boundary violations, the stalking, the men who think they own you because they've paid for your content. It's something I've learned to navigate. Well, you shouldn't have to navigate it alone. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. What are you think? I'm thinking that maybe it's time to tell Mom and Dad what's really going on. My stomach dropped. Absolutely not. Alexis, this person knows where you live, he's escalating. What if he shows up at their house looking for you? What if he contacts them somehow? I hadn't considered that possibility, but now that Dylan had mentioned it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My parents lived in a quiet Scottsdale neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. If a stranger started asking questions about me, it would get back to them quickly. They don't need to know about my OnlyFans account to know that I have a stalker, I said finally. But they deserve to know why you have a stalker, and they deserve to understand why you've been able to help them financially, when your graphic design work alone shouldn't cover your own expenses, let alone theirs. I knew he was right, but the thought of having that conversation with my parents made me feel sick. They were proud of me. They bragged to their friends about my graphic design business, about how I was so successful and independent. What would they think when they learned the truth? I need time to think about it, I said. How much time? Because I'm pretty sure stalkers don't operate on your timeline. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again, not a message this time, but a phone call from an unknown number. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. Answer it, Dylan said. Put it on speaker. I accepted the call with shaking hands. Hello, Alex. The voice was male, middle-aged, with a slight accent. I couldn't place. I think it's time we had a proper conversation. Dylan lunged for the phone, but I held up a hand to stop him. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I think you know who this is. I've been trying to get your attention for months, but you keep ignoring me. That's not very nice, considering how much money I've spent supporting your career. I don't owe you anything beyond the content you've paid for, don't I? I've been one of your most loyal customers. I've tipped generously. I've been respectful in my messages. All I wanted was a little personal attention. Maybe a chance to meet in person. That's not part of what I offer, but it could be, for the right price. No. It could. And if you contact me again, I'll be reporting this to the police. Oh, Alexis, you already did that. I saw the officers at your apartment this morning. Very thorough of you to call them so quickly. My blood went cold. He'd been watching when the police arrived. He was probably still watching. This conversation is over, I said, and hung up. Dylan was already on his phone, calling Officer Martinez back. I walked to my bedroom and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. What are you doing? Dylan called from the living room. I can't stay here, not tonight, maybe not for a while. Come stay with me. I paused in my packing. Dylan lived in a downtown loft with building security and a doorman. It would be safer than my apartment complex, but it would also mean accepting help from him again, just when we'd started to establish a more honest relationship. Are you Alexis, you've been supporting me for 2 years. The least I can do is give you a safe place to sleep. An hour later, I was sitting in Dylan's living room, looking out at the Phoenix skyline, and trying to process everything that had happened in the past week. My entire life had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure which end was up anymore. I called Melissa, Dylan said, sitting down next to me with 2 cups of tea. I told her everything, about the money, about my fake startup, about your situation. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She's angry that I lied to her, but she's more concerned about you right now. She wants to help however she can. She doesn't even know me. She knows you've been helping me for 2 years without asking for anything in return. That's enough for her. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I'd been so focused on keeping my work secret that I'd forgotten how good it felt to have people care about my well-being. There's something else, Dylan continued. I got the job, the marketing position. I start Monday. That's amazing. Congratulations. It's a starting salary, nothing glamorous, but it's honest work and it's mine. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the city. Finally, Dylan spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said, about family helping each other honestly. Yeah, I want to help you figure out who this stalker is. Really help, not just moral support. I looked at him skeptically. How? I have some experience with social media investigation from my fake startup day. I know how to trace IP addresses,
cross-reference usernames across platforms, find connections between online accounts and real identities. Dylan, this could be dangerous. So is doing nothing. So is waiting for him to escalate further. He turned to face me fully. Let me use the skills I learned pretending to be a tech entrepreneur to actually help my sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dylan's months of faking his way through startup culture had actually taught him legitimate digital investigation technique. Maybe all his lying hadn't been completely worthless after all. Okay, I said finally. But we do this carefully, and we keep the police informed of everything we find. Agreed. That night, Dylan set up his laptop on his dining room table and started working. I sat beside him, providing details about my OnlyFans account, my security settings, and everything I could remember about username deleted 4847's behavior patterns. He's been a subscriber for 4 months, I said, scrolling through my records. His first payment was in May. The messages started friendly, typical customer interaction stuff. When did they start getting personal? About 6 weeks ago. He started asking about my life outside of work, where I went to school, what I like to do for fun, whether I had a boyfriend. Did you answer any of those questions? No. I have standard responses for personal questions. I keep everything vague and redirect back to my content. Dylan nodded, typing notes as I spoke. What about his payment method? Does OnlyFans show you any information about how subscribers pay? Limited information. I can see if they use credit cards versus digital payments, but not specific details. That's okay. There are other ways to track someone's online behavior. He pulled up several browser tabs, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who actually knew what he was doing. What's interesting is that he found your real name and address. That suggests he either knows you personally, or he's very good at digital investigation, or he hired someone who is. True, but let's start with the assumption that he's working alone. If we find evidence of professional-level investigation techniques, we'll know we're dealing with something more serious. For the next 3 hours, Dylan worked his way through various social media platforms, reverse image searches, and public records databases. I watched him work, impressed despite myself by his methodical approach. Found something, he said around midnight. What? Your stalker made a mistake. He used the same username on Reddit that he used for his first OnlyFans account, the one from before he started harassing you. Dylan pulled up a Reddit profile for username deleted 4847. The account was 2 years old, with hundreds of posts and comments, spanning multiple subreddits. Most of it was innocuous, sports commentary, movie discussions, technology news, but there were also posts in several OnlyFans-related subreddits, and those told a different story. Look at this, Dylan said, clicking on a post from 8 months ago. He's asking for advice on how to find a content creator's real identity, and here 6 months ago, he's bragging about successfully tracking down another creator's personal information. I felt sick reading the posts. This wasn't my stalker's first time doing this. I wasn't his first victim. There's more, Dylan continued, clicking through to the stalker's comment history. He mentions living in Phoenix multiple times. He references specific local businesses and events. And look at this comment from 3 months ago. The comment was in response to a post about coffee shops in Tempe. My stalker had written, Copper Moon on Mill Avenue has the best atmosphere for working, great view of the college crowd. He frequents my coffee shop, I whispered. It looks like, which means he's probably seen you there in person, maybe multiple times, before he ever subscribed to your OnlyFans account. The pieces were starting to come together in a way that made me feel exposed and vulnerable. This person hadn't just randomly found my content online and become obsessed. He'd seen me in real life, probably learned my routine, and then sought out my online presence. Specifically, we need to call Officer Martinez, I said. We will, but let me see what else I can find first. Dylan continued digging through the Reddit account while I paced around his apartment, too anxious to sit still. Everything I'd thought I knew about this situation was wrong. The stalker wasn't some random internet creep who'd gotten carried away with a parasocial relationship. He was a predator who'd selected me as a target based on real-world observation. Alexis, Dylan called from the dining room. You need to see this. I rushed back to the laptop. Dylan had found a post from 2 weeks ago, in a subreddit I'd never heard of, called I'm looking for advice on approaching someone I've been admiring from afar. The post read, she doesn't know me personally, but I've been supporting her business for months. I think she'd be open to meeting in person if I approached it the right way. Any suggestions for how to make a good first impression? The responses were mostly what you'd expect from anonymous internet users. Some genuine advice mixed with jokes and sarcasm, but one response stood out. Dude, if she doesn't know you personally, and you've been supporting her business, this sounds like you're talking about a cam girl, or OnlyFans creator. That's not the same as someone you actually have a relationship with. You might want to reconsider this approach. My stalker had responded, thanks for the input, but I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This is more personal than you realize. He thinks he has a relationship with you, Dylan said quietly. A lot of subscribers think that. It's part of the fantasy. Usually it stays fantasy, but this guy is trying to make it reality. I nodded, staring at the screen. The Reddit posts painted a picture of someone who'd been planning this escalation for months, someone who genuinely believed that his financial support entitled him to a personal relationship with me. There's one more thing, Dylan said. I cross-referenced his Reddit posting times with the times he's been messaging you on OnlyFans. There's a pattern. He pulled up a spreadsheet he'd created, tracking the stalker's online activity across both platforms. He's most active between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m., Monday through Friday, but on weekends, he's online during the day. And look at this. Every time he posts on Reddit about being at Copper Moon Cafe, you get a message from him within a few hours. He's watching me there and then going home to message me. It looks like it, which means his house or apartment is probably within a reasonable distance of the cafe. I felt like I was going to be sick. For months I'd been sitting in my favorite coffee shop, working on my laptop, drinking my usual order, completely unaware that someone was watching me, and using those observations to fuel an online obsession. We're calling the police right now, I said. Officer Martinez answered her phone despite the late hour, listened to our findings, and promised to be at Dylan's apartment within the hour. While we waited, I called Natalie and filled her in on everything that had happened. Jesus, Alexis, are you okay? I don't know. I feel like my entire sense of safety has been shattered. Where are you staying? With Dylan for now, but I can't hide forever. You're not hiding. You're being smart and keeping yourself safe while the police do their job. What if they can't find him? What if he's more careful than we think? Then you'll figure out the next step when you get there. But don't borrow trouble from tomorrow when today is already overwhelming enough. After I hung up with Natalie, Dylan and I spent the time before Officer Martinez arrived going through my OnlyFans messages more systematically. Now that we knew what to look for, patterns emerged that I'd missed before. He always messages you after you post new content, Dylan usually within an hour. That's not unusual. A lot of subscribers are very responsive to new posts. But look at the timing. You post at 9 p.m., he messages at 9:50. You post at 2 p.m., he messages at 2:20. It's like he's getting notifications and responding immediately. OnlyFans does send push notifications when creators post new content. But most people don't respond that quickly unless they're actively waiting for it, unless watching for your posts is a priority for them. The more we analyzed the data, the clearer it became that this person's attention to my online activity went far beyond normal subscriber behavior. He was monitoring my account obsessively, probably spending hours each day focused on my content and my perceived responses to his messages. When Officer Martinez arrived, she brought a detective with her, Detective Johnson, who specialized in cyber-stalking cases.
They spread Dylan's research across the dining room table like evidence in a murder investigation. "This is excellent work," Detective Johnson said after reviewing everything we'd found. "You've probably saved us days of investigation time." "Can you arrest him?" I asked. "We can certainly bring him in for questioning. Between the threatening messages, the Reddit posts, and the physical evidence at your apartment, we have enough for a harassment charge. Whether we can make stalking charges stick will depend on what else we find." What do you mean? Stalking requires a pattern of behavior that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. What you've documented certainly qualifies, but we'll need to prove that this person knew his behavior was unwelcome and continued anyway. Detective Johnson explained that they would need to trace the stalker's real identity through his internet activity, obtain a warrant to search his devices and residence, and build a comprehensive case that demonstrated both the pattern of behavior and his intent to cause fear or harm. In the meantime, Officer Martinez said, I want you to stay somewhere other than your apartment, continue documenting any contact attempts, and consider whether you want to temporarily suspend your OnlyFans account. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. My OnlyFans account wasn't just my primary source of income, it was my business, my independence, my creative outlet. Suspending it would mean letting this stalker win. It would mean allowing his criminal behavior to destroy something I'd built from nothing. I understand the impulse to keep working, Detective Johnson said, noticing my reaction. But right now, your safety has to be the priority. With respect, Detective, you don't understand what you're asking me to give up. This isn't just a job I can take a vacation from. This is my career, my livelihood. The source of income that allows me to support myself and help my family. I get that, but if something happens to you, none of that will matter. After the officers left, Dylan and I sat in his living room in exhausted silence. It was nearly 3 a.m., and I felt like I'd lived through a week's worth of trauma in a single day. Are you going to suspend your account? Dylan asked finally. I don't know. Maybe temporarily, but I hate the idea of this person controlling my life. What if there was a way to keep working but make yourself safer? Like what? What if you changed your entire online presence? New username, new persona, different posting schedule, different content style. Essentially start over with better security measures. I considered the idea. It would mean losing the subscriber base I'd spent 3 years building, starting from zero with my follower count and monthly income, but it would also mean escaping my stalker's obsessive attention and regaining some control over my online presence. That's not a small thing you're suggesting. It would take months to rebuild what I have now. I know, but maybe I could help with that too. How? Marketing, social media strategy, building an online brand. All the things I was pretending to know how to do for my fake startup. Dylan gave me a rueful smile. Turns out some of those skills are actually useful when applied honestly. For the first time all day, I felt a spark of hope. Not just hope for my immediate safety, but hope for something bigger. The possibility that this crisis might actually lead to something better. A chance to rebuild my business with the support of someone who understood both the work I did and the challenges I faced. Okay, I said, but first, we focus on catching this guy. Then we figure out what comes next. Deal. As I settled into Dylan's guest room that night, I thought about how much had changed in the past week. 7 days ago, my biggest worry was keeping my OnlyFans work secret from my family. Now I was dealing with a stalker, living in my brother's apartment, and considering rebuilding my entire online presence from scratch. But somehow, despite everything that had gone wrong, I felt less alone than I had in years. For the first time since I'd started doing sex work, I had someone in my corner who knew the truth about my life and was willing to fight for my safety and success. It wasn't the way I'd planned for things to unfold, but maybe that was okay. Maybe some secrets were meant to be revealed, and maybe some crises were meant to bring people closer together. The stalker was still out there, and I knew the worst might still be ahead of us, but I also knew I wouldn't be facing it alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Detective Johnson called at 8 in the morning with news that made my coffee taste like ash in my mouth. They'd traced the IP address from my stalker's Reddit account to a specific apartment complex in Tempe, less than 2 miles from my own building. Even worse, when they'd run the resident names through their database, they'd found a match that made my blood run cold. Gregory Hoffman, 34 years old, lives in Unit 2B at Desert Vista Apartments. Detective Johnson said over speakerphone while Dylan and I sat at his kitchen counter. He has a previous arrest for harassment of a female coworker at his last job, though charges were dropped when she declined to pursue prosecution. So, he's done this before, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It appears we're working on getting a warrant to search his apartment, but that could take a few days. In the meantime, we want to set up surveillance at your apartment complex in case he shows up there looking for you. What about arresting him for the messages he's already sent? We will, but we want to do this right. Build a solid case that will actually stick in court. Too many stalking cases fall apart because we move too quickly and don't have enough evidence. After Detective Johnson hung up, Dylan and I sat in silence for several minutes. Having a name and address somehow made the threat feel more real, more immediate. Gregory Hoffman wasn't just some anonymous username anymore. He was a real person with a real history of targeting women, and he'd chosen me as his latest victim. I need to tell Mom and Dad, I said finally. Dylan looked surprised. Are you sure? If this goes to trial, if it becomes public, they're going to find out anyway. I'd rather they hear it from me first. Do you want me to come with you? I considered it, but this felt like something I needed to do alone. No, but thank you. This is my mess to clean up. It's not your mess, Alexis. This is something that happened to you, not something you caused. I knew he was right intellectually, but emotionally I still felt responsible. I was the one who'd chosen to do sex work. I was the one who'd kept it secret from my family. I was the one who'd somehow attracted the attention of a dangerous person. The logical part of my brain understood that none of those things made me responsible for Gregory Hoffman's criminal behavior. But the guilty part of my brain wasn't listening to logic. I drove to my parents' house in Scottsdale that afternoon, rehearsing the conversation in my head the entire way. How do you tell your conservative parents that you're a successful sex worker? How do you explain that you've been financially supporting the family through income they wouldn't approve of? How do you break the news that you're being stalked because of work they don't understand? There was no good way to have this conversation, so I decided to just dive in head first and hope we all survived the landing. Mom was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing vegetables for dinner with the methodical precision she brought to everything in her life. Dad was in his home office, probably reviewing property listings or following up with potential clients. It was a normal Thursday afternoon in the Reeves household, and I was about to shatter that normalcy completely. Alex, what a nice surprise, Mom said, giving me a hug that smelled like her signature lavender perfume. Dylan mentioned you were staying with him for a few days. Everything okay with your apartment? Actually, that's what I need to talk to you and Dad about. Is he available? Something in my tone must have alerted her that this wasn't a casual visit. Of course, honey. Let me get him. 5 minutes later, we were all sitting in the living room where I'd grown up, where I'd done homework at the coffee table and watched Disney movies on weekend morning. The same room where my parents had celebrated my high school graduation, my college acceptance, my first graphic design contract. Now I was about to tell them something that might change how they saw all of those achievements. There's something I need to tell you both, and it's going to be difficult to hear, I began, but I need you to listen to the whole story before you react, okay? My parents exchanged worried glances. Of course, Dad said. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them about my OnlyFans account, about how I'd built it from nothing into a successful business over the past 3 years. I explained how the income from my content creation had allowed me to help them with their mortgage, to support Dylan's fake startup ventures, to pay for my own education and living expenses without going into debt. I watched their faces as I spoke, seeing confusion give way to shock, shock give way to something that might have been disappointment, or might have been concern. Dad's expression was unreadable. Mom looked like she was trying to solve a complicated math problem in her head. So when you said you were doing well with your graphic design business, Mom said slowly, I am doing well with graphic design, but most of my income comes from OnlyFans, and when you've been helping us with the house payments, that money came from my OnlyFans earn. Dad was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you tell us? Because I was afraid of exactly this reaction. I was afraid you'd be ashamed of me, or disappointed, or that you'd try to talk me out of it. Are we supposed to be proud of? Mom asked, her voice sharp with something that might have been anger or might have been hurt. I'd like you to be proud of the fact that your daughter built a successful business from nothing. I'd like you to be proud that I've been financially independent since I was 20. I'd like you to be proud that I've been able to help my family when they needed it. But Alexis, Dad said gently, there are other ways to make money, other businesses you could build. You're right, there are, but this is the business I chose to build, and I'm good at it. I'm successful at it, and until this week, I was happy doing it. That's when I told them about Gregory Hoffman, about the stalking, the escalating messages, the police investigation. I watched my parents' faces change again as they realized that their daughter wasn't just doing work they disapproved of, she was in actual danger because of it. Oh honey, Mom said, her anger dissolving into concern. Why didn't you call us immediately? Because I was trying to handle it myself, because I didn't want to drag you into the complicated parts of my life. We're your parents, Dad said firmly. There are no parts of your life too complicated for us to handle. The conversation that followed was long, emotional, and sometimes difficult. My parents asked questions I wasn't prepared for. They expressed concerns I'd been trying not to think about. They struggled to understand how their daughter had become successful doing something they'd never imagined she'd consider, but they also listened, really listened, and gradually I began to see their perspective shift from judgment to acceptance, to something that might eventually become support. I won't pretend I understand your choices, Mom said finally, and I won't pretend I'm comfortable with the type of work you do, but I can see that you've thought about this carefully, that you're successful at it, and that you've used that success to help the people you love. And right now, Dad added, our priority isn't your career choices, it's your safety. The police think they'll be able to arrest him soon, I said. Good, but until they do, you're not staying alone anywhere. You can stay here or with Dylan, but you're not going back to that apartment by yourself. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, not just because of their concern for my safety, but because of their acceptance of me. It wasn't enthusiastic approval of my career choices, but it was acknowledgement that I was an adult capable of making my own decisions about my life and my work. There's something else, I said. Dylan's been helping with the investigation. He used some of the technical skills he learned during his startup phase to track down information about the stalker. Dylan's startup phase? Mom asked. I realized I'd just opened another can of worms. My parents still thought Dylan was a successful entrepreneur. They didn't know about the fake business, the BMW I'd helped pay for, or the downtown loft that existed primarily on my financial support. That's Dylan's story to tell, I said carefully. But you should know that he's been going through his own period of figuring out who he wants to be and what he wants to do with his life. Dad nodded thoughtfully. We've suspected something was going on with him. His success story always seemed a little too good to be true. Are both of our children having identity crises at the same time? Mom asked with a weak smile. I think we're both just trying to figure out how to be honest about who we really are instead of who we thought we were supposed to be. That evening, I stayed for dinner and found myself having the most honest conversation with my parents that we'd had in years. Not just about my work or Dylan's struggles, but about expectations and disappointments, about the pressure to live up to certain standards, about the difference between supporting your children and controlling them. I keep thinking about all the times you've helped us financially, Dad said, as we cleared the dinner dishes, all those months when business was slow and you made sure we didn't lose the house. I feel like I should have asked more questions about where that money was coming from. Would it have changed anything if you'd known? I don't know, maybe, but I think I would have wanted to find another solution. There wasn't another solution, Dad, at least not one that would have worked as quickly or as reliably. I know that now, and I'm grateful for what you did, even if I'm still processing how you did it. My phone rang while we were finishing the dishes. Detective Johnson's name appeared on the screen, and my parents both stopped what they were doing to listen. We've got him, Detective Johnson said without preamble. Gregory Hoffman was arrested an hour ago at his apartment. We found evidence linking him to your case and to at least 2 other women he's been harassing online. What kind of evidence? Screenshots of your OnlyFans account saved to his computer, printed photos of you that he'd taken at various locations around Tempe, detailed notes about your daily routine,
and plans for what he called making contact with you. I felt sick, imagining this stranger studying printed photos of me, tracking my movements, planning some kind of confrontation, but I also felt an enormous sense of relief. He was arrested, he was off the streets, the immediate threat was over. What happens next? He's being charged with stalking, harassment, and cyberstalking. Given his previous arrest and the evidence we found, we're confident these charges will stick. You'll need to testify at the trial, but until then, you should be safe to resume your normal routine. After I hung up, my parents both hugged me tightly. It's over, Mom whispered. The stalking is over, I corrected. But everything else is just beginning. That night, I drove back to Dylan's apartment with a strange mix of emotions. Relief that Gregory Hoffman was in custody. Gratitude that my parents had taken the news better than I'd expected. Uncertainty about what came next for my career, my family relationships, and my own sense of identity. Dylan was waiting with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine. I heard the news, he said. Detective Johnson called me too. How do you feel about it? Relieved, proud of you for handling all of this so well, and a little scared about what Mom and Dad said when you told them about my fake startup. I laughed. They figured it out on their own, apparently. They're waiting for you to tell them the truth when you're ready. Great. So now I get to have my own difficult conversation with them. Want some advice? Always. Tell them the truth about where you are, not just where you've been. Tell them about the real job you got, about the changes you're making, about who you want to become. They can handle disappointment better than they can handle dishonesty. Dylan nodded thoughtfully. Speaking of truth, I have something to tell you too. I've been thinking about your idea to rebuild your OnlyFans presence with better security measures, and I think I have a proposal for you. I'm listening. What if we made it a real partnership? Not just me helping you with marketing, but a legitimate business collaboration. You handle the creative content and customer relationships. I handle the technical infrastructure, security, and business development. I stared at him. You want to go into business with me in the sex work industry? I want to go into business with my sister in an industry where she's already proven she can be successful, an industry that clearly needs better security protocols and business support systems. Dylan, do you understand what you're suggesting? This would mean your name being associated with sex work, your girlfriend, your future employers, your friends, they'd all know. Good. Maybe it's time I stopped being ashamed of things I don't understand, and started supporting the people I love who are doing important work. Important work. You provide a service that people value. You run a business that generates significant income and supports multiple people. You've built something from nothing using creativity, marketing skills, and business acumen. How is that not important work? I felt tears prick at my eye. In 3 years of doing OnlyFans content, no one had ever described my work as important. Lucrative, sure, entrepreneurial maybe, but important. That was a new perspective. What would this partnership look like practically? We'd form an LLC, create proper business bank accounts, tax structures, marketing budgets. I'd build you a completely secure technical infrastructure, encrypted communications, anonymous payment processing, advanced privacy protection. We'd develop a brand strategy that protects your personal identity while maximizing your earning potential. And what would you get out of it? A legitimate business to build instead of a fake one, the chance to use my skills for something real, and the opportunity to support my sister in work that she's passionate about and successful at. I considered his proposal while we ate dinner and talked through the details. It was an unusual business partnership, certainly not one that either of us could have imagined a week ago, but it was also an opportunity to take something I'd built alone and make it stronger, safer, and more sustainable. There's one condition, I said finally. Name it. If we do this, we do it completely honest. No hiding from family, no pretending it's something other than what it is, no shame about the work we're doing. Agreed, but that means you'd have to be prepared for the consequences of that honesty. What do you mean? I mean, Mom and Dad might struggle with this more than they're letting on. I mean, your friends might react differently than you expect. I mean, strangers might judge you based on incomplete information about your work. I thought about Natalie, who'd been supportive from the beginning. I thought about my parents, who'd just proven they could handle difficult truths better than I'd expected. I thought about Gregory Hoffman, who represented the worst possible reaction to my work, and who was now sitting in jail where he belonged. I'm tired of living in fear of other people's reactions, I said. I'm tired of being ashamed of work that I'm good at, and that provides for the people I love. I'm tired of hiding the most successful thing I've ever built. So that's a yes to the partnership. But we start small, we build carefully, and we make sure we can trust each other completely before we make any major moves. Deal. We spent the rest of the evening brainstorming business structures, security protocols, and marketing strategy. For the first time since I'd started my OnlyFans account, I was planning for its future instead of just managing its present. For the first time since Dylan had dropped out of college, he was working on a real business plan instead of a fantasy. It felt like the beginning of something important. 3 days later, Detective Johnson called with an update that changed everything again. Gregory Hoffman had been released on bail pending his trial, and within hours of his release, he'd attempted to contact me through a new OnlyFans account. He's violated the restraining order, Detective Johnson said. We can arrest him again, but he'll probably be released on bail again, unless we can prove he's an immediate physical threat. What does that mean for me? It means you need to be extra careful until his trial. It means the security measures we discussed are more important than ever, and it means this situation might not be over as quickly as we'd hoped. I hung up the phone and looked at Dylan, who'd heard the entire conversation. So much for resuming normal routine, I said. Maybe normal routine was overrated anyway, Dylan replied. Maybe it's time to build a better routine. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this crisis is pushing us toward changes we needed to make anyway. Changes that will make us stronger, safer, and more honest about who we are and what we want. I thought about his words as I updated my security settings, changed my passwords, and prepared for what might be a long legal battle with my stalker. Dylan was right. The crisis had forced conversations that needed to happen, revealed truths that needed to be acknowledged, and created opportunities that might not have existed otherwise. Gregory Hoffman's harassment had been traumatic and frightening, but it had also catalyzed changes in my life that were ultimately positive. I was closer to my family than I'd been in years. I had a business partner who understood and supported my work. I was no longer hiding the most significant part of my professional life from the people who mattered to me. The stalker was still a threat, and the legal process would be stressful and unpredictable, but I was no longer facing those challenges alone. I had support, resources, and a plan for moving forward. More importantly, I had clarity about who I was and what I wanted. I was Alexis Reeves, successful content creator and entrepreneur. I was a daughter who helped her family, a sister who supported her brother's growth, and a business owner who was building something meaningful. I was also someone who refused to be ashamed of work that was legal, profitable, and personally fulfilling. Someone who wouldn't hide from difficult conversations or challenging situations. Someone who was ready to fight for her right to live and work authentically. The crisis had tested my relationships, my safety, and my sense of self, but it had also revealed strengths I didn't know I had, and connections I'd been afraid to acknowledge. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Dylan's apartment door sometime between midnight and dawn. My name was written across the front in the same neat handwriting I'd seen on the note left at my apartment window. Inside was a single photograph of me walking out of my parents' house 3 days earlier, with a message scrawled on the back: "Family dinner looks nice. Maybe I should join you next time." My hands were shaking as I showed Dylan the photo over breakfast. Gregory Hoffman wasn't just violating his restraining order anymore. He was escalating to direct threats against my family. "We're calling Detective Johnson right now," Dylan said, already reaching for his phone. "And then we're calling Mom and Dad," I added. "They need to know he's been watching their house." Detective Johnson arrived within an hour, but his news wasn't what I wanted to hear. "The photo alone isn't enough for us to arrest him again. He's not technically threatening violence, and he could argue he took the picture from a public street. But he's clearly violating the restraining order by contacting me." "Yes, and we'll pursue that. But his lawyer will probably get him released again, within 24 hours, unless we can prove he poses an immediate physical danger. So what are our options?" "Honestly, you need to consider going public with this situation. The more people who know about Gregory Hoffman's behavior, the harder it becomes for him to operate in the shadows. Going public, the phrase hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent 3 years carefully protecting my privacy, keeping my online work separate from my personal life, maintaining the boundaries that kept me safe. Going public would mean exposing not just my stalking situation, but my entire OnlyFans career to scrutiny from friends, extended family, potential employers, and complete strangers. What would that look like? Media interviews, social media posts, maybe working with online safety organizations to raise awareness about stalking in the sex work industry. The goal would be to put enough public pressure on Hoffman that continued harassment becomes too risky for him.
And if that doesn't work, then at least we'll have documented everything publicly, which strengthens our legal case and makes it harder for him to claim his behavior was misunderstood. After Detective Johnson left, Dylan and I spent the morning researching media outlets that covered online safety issues and sex worker rights. It was surreal, planning to voluntarily expose the very secrets I'd been protecting for years. "You don't have to do this," Dylan said as we compiled a list of potential contacts. "There might be other options." "Like what?" "Hiding forever, changing my name and moving to another state. He's already shown he can find my family's address. Running away isn't going to solve this. But going public isn't just about this situation anymore. Once you do media interviews about being stalked as a sex worker, that becomes your public identity forever. People will Google your name and find articles about this." I'd been trying not to think about that aspect of it, but Dylan was right. Going public would mean accepting that my OnlyFans work would become common knowledge among everyone I'd ever meet, for the rest of my life. Future employers, romantic partners, children I might have someday, they'd all be able to find news articles about Alexis Reeves, the OnlyFans creator who was stalked by an obsessed subscriber. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I said slowly. "What do you mean? Maybe I'm tired of living a double life. Maybe I'm tired of being ashamed of work that's been successful and fulfilling. Maybe it's time to own who I am completely instead of selectively." Dylan was quiet for a moment. "That's a big decision to make under pressure." "I've been making this decision gradually for 3 years. Every time I chose to continue doing OnlyFans work, every time I invested in growing my subscriber base, every time I used that income to help our family, I was choosing this path. I just wasn't admitting it to myself. But there's a difference between privately accepting your choices and publicly defending them." "Yes, there is. And maybe it's time I learned to do both." That afternoon I called Natalie to discuss the situation. She listened to everything that had happened since Gregory Hoffman's arrest and release, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you sure you're making this decision for the right reasons? Because this feels like you're considering blowing up your entire life to solve one problem." "What if it's not just one problem? What if the secrecy itself has become a problem?" "Explain." "I've been successful at something for 3 years, but I can't celebrate that success with anyone except you. I've been financially independent since college, but I have to pretend I'm struggling to make ends meet. I've built a business that supports multiple people, but I can't put it on my resume or talk about it in professional settings." "Those are real costs," Natalie agreed. "But so is public scrutiny. So is being known primarily as that OnlyFans girl who got stalked. So is dealing with judgment from people who don't understand sex work. But what's the alternative? Keep hiding forever? Let Gregory Hoffman control my life because I'm too afraid of other people's opinions to fight back publicly." "Fair point. But if you're going to do this, you need to do it strategically, not just reactive panic, but a thoughtful campaign that tells your story on your terms." Natalie was right. If I was going to go public, I needed to control the narrative instead of letting others define it for me. That meant choosing the right media outlets, crafting my message carefully, and being prepared for every possible reaction. "I have an idea," Dylan said when I shared Natalie's advice with him. "What if we don't start with traditional media? What if we start with social media, where you can tell your story directly without a journalist interpreting it?" "You mean, like a YouTube video or something?" "Exactly. You control the content, the tone, the message. You share as much or as little as you want about your work, your stalking situation, and your reasons for speaking out. Then if traditional media picks it up, they're responding to your narrative instead of creating their own. The idea appealed to me. I'd spent 3 years creating content for OnlyFans subscribers. Making a video for a broader audience would use many of the same skills. But it would also mean stepping out from behind the carefully constructed persona I used for my adult content and speaking as myself, authentically and vulnerably. What would I say? You'd tell the truth about your work, about your stalker, about the impossible position women in sex work are put in when they try to seek help or protection, and about you, about our family, about the money I've been sending everyone. Dylan considered this. You tell whatever parts of the truth you're comfortable telling. This is your story to share, not mine or our parents. That evening, I sat down at Dylan's dining room table with my laptop and started writing a script, not for a character or a persona, but for myself. For Alexis Reeves, speaking directly to the world for the first time about who she really was and what she really did. My name is Alexis Reeves. For the past 3 years I've been a successful content creator on OnlyFans, earning a 6-figure income that has allowed me to support myself, help my family and build financial independence. I've also been living a double life, hiding my work from most of the people in my life, because I was afraid of their judgment. 2 weeks ago that double life started to collapse when my brother discovered my OnlyFans account. 1 week ago it fully imploded when a subscriber began stalking me in real life, threatening my safety and the safety of my family. I'm making this video because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being ashamed of work that is legal, consensual and financially successful. And I'm tired of living in fear of a man who thinks his subscription payments entitle him to control my life. I wrote for 2 hours, crafting a message that was personal but not overly intimate, honest but not reckless. I explained my reasons for doing OnlyFans work, the business skills it had taught me, and the financial independence it had provided. I described Gregory Hoffman's stalking behavior without sensationalizing it, and I talked about the challenges sex workers face when seeking help from law enforcement. Most importantly, I talked about the cost of secrecy, not just to me, but to my family relationships, my professional development, and my sense of self. I'm not asking anyone to approve of my career choices. I conclude, I'm asking for the right to make those choices without being harassed, stalked, or threatened. I'm asking for the same safety and respect that any other entrepreneur deserves. And to Gregory Hoffman, if you're watching this, your behavior is criminal, not romantic. Your obsession is frightening, not flattering, and your continued harassment will only result in more legal consequences and more public exposure of your actions. Dylan helped me film the video the next morning. We kept it simple, me sitting at his kitchen table, speaking directly to the camera with natural lighting from the window behind me. No fancy production, no dramatic music, just a woman telling her truth as clearly and calmly as possible. Are you ready for this? Dylan asked as I prepared to upload the video to a new YouTube channel we'd created. No, but I don't think anyone's ever ready to completely change their life. I think you just reach a point where staying the same becomes more painful than change. I posted the video at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon with the title, Why I'm No Longer Hiding My OnlyFans Career. Within an hour it had 100 views. By dinner time, it had 1,000. By midnight it had 10,000 views, and hundreds of comments. The responses were everything I'd expected, and more. Some viewers were supportive, praising my honesty and courage in speaking out about stalking. Others were critical, questioning my life choices and suggesting I'd brought the harassment on myself. A few were genuinely curious, asking thoughtful questions about the business side of content creation, or the safety challenges faced by sex workers. But the most surprising responses came from other women who'd had similar experiences, women who'd been stalked by customers, clients, or subscribers, women who'd built successful businesses they couldn't talk about publicly, women who'd been supporting family members while hiding the source of their income. Thank you for saying what so many of us couldn't, wrote one comment. I've been dealing with a stalker from my cam work for 6 months, and didn't know how to get help without exposing my job. I'm a successful escort, and I've been helping my parents with medical bills for 2 years, wrote another. They think the money comes from my consulting business. I felt so alone until I saw your video. My husband doesn't know about my OnlyFans account, but it's paying for our kids' college tuition. I wish I had your courage to be honest. Reading these messages, I realized my video had accidentally tapped into something much bigger than my own situation. There were thousands of women living double lives, hiding successful careers in sex work because of stigma and judgment. Women who were supporting families, building financial independence, and running legitimate businesses while pretending to be struggling or relying on partners or family for support. Look at this, I told Dylan, showing him some of the comments. I thought I was the only one dealing with this kind of secrecy. You've started something, he said. These women are connecting with each other through your story. The video continued to gain traction over the next few days. It was shared on Twitter, discussed on Reddit, and picked up by several online publications that covered sex work and digital safety issues. A few mainstream media outlets reached out for interviews, and I found myself in the strange position of becoming an accidental spokesperson for an industry I'd never intended to represent publicly. But the attention also brought unwanted consequences. Gregory Hoffman saw the video obviously, and his response was swift and vindictive. Within 24 hours of the video going live, he'd created multiple fake social media accounts to harass me and had somehow obtained my parents' phone number to call them directly. He called the house 3 times last night, Dad told me when I arrived at their place Thursday morning. The first time he hung up when I answered, the second time he asked if I was proud of my daughter. The third time he said he was a friend of yours and wanted to discuss business opportunities. I'm so sorry, I never meant for this to affect you directly. Don't apologize, Mom said firmly. We watched your video, Alexis. What you said about living a double life, about being afraid of our judgment, that broke our hearts. We failed you, Dad added. Not because of your career choices, but because we created an environment where you felt like you couldn't be honest with us about something so important in your life. You didn't fail me, I chose not to tell you because I was protecting myself. From what? From us loving you, from us supporting your success. Mom's voice was thick with emotion. Honey, we might not understand everything about your work, but we understand that you've been successful at it. We understand that you've used that success to help people you care about. How could we be anything but proud of that? The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had as a family. We talked about expectations and assumptions, about the difference between approval and acceptance, about the ways fear can poison relationships even when love is abundant. I want you to know, Dad said finally, that we're going to support you through whatever comes next. Media interviews, legal proceedings, whatever this Gregory person tries to do, we're in your corner. Even if that means people knowing that your daughter does sex work. Especially then, Mom said, because if people are going to judge our family based on incomplete information about work they don't understand, then those aren't people whose opinions matter to us anyway. That afternoon, Detective Johnson called with news that changed everything. Gregory Hoffman had been arrested again, this time for violating his restraining order through his phone calls to my parents. But more importantly, the public attention from my video had led to 3 other women coming forward with evidence of his stalking behavior. This is exactly what we needed, Detective Johnson said, a pattern of behavior across multiple victims. His lawyer is going to have a much harder time arguing that this was a misunderstanding or a one-time incident. What does that mean for the charges? It means we can pursue felony stalking charges instead of misdemeanor harassment. It means he's likely to serve actual jail time instead of just probation, and it means the other women he victimized are going to get justice too. All because I made that video. All because you were brave enough to speak out publicly. Sometimes sunlight really is the best disinfectant. The arrest made news in local media outlets, with several articles mentioning my video and my decision to go public about my stalking experience. Within a week I was being contacted by organizations that worked on online safety issues, asking if I'd be willing to speak at conferences or participate in awareness campaigns. This is becoming bigger than just your personal situation, Dylan observed as we reviewed yet another interview request. You're becoming an advocate. I never intended to become an advocate. The best advocates usually don't. They just reach a point where staying silent becomes impossible. Are you okay with all this attention, with being associated with it? Alexis, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the work you do. I'm proud of how you've handled this situation, and I'm proud to be your business partner. Even knowing that people will always connect your name with mine. That when you apply for jobs or meet new people, they might Google you and find articles about your sister's OnlyFans career, especially that because that means they'll also find articles about how my sister stood up to a stalker, built a successful business, and spoke out for other women in similar situations. The trial proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. With multiple victims and extensive evidence of Gregory Hoffman's stalking behavior, his lawyer advised him to accept a plea deal rather than risk a lengthy trial. He pled guilty to felony stalking charges and received an 18-month jail sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with no contact allowed with any of his victims. "It's over," Detective Johnson said after the sentencing hearing. "He can't contact you, he can't come near you, and if he violates the terms of his probation, he goes back to jail for the full remainder of his sentence." Just like that, just like that. Sometimes the system actually works the way it's supposed to. But even with Gregory Hoffman behind bars, the changes his harassment had catalyzed in my life continued to ripple outward. The video I'd made about my experience had been viewed over 100,000 times, and had sparked conversations about sex work, online safety, and family acceptance that extended far beyond my personal situation. I'd been invited to speak at a conference about digital entrepreneurship, with my talk specifically focused on building businesses in stigmatized industries. A documentary filmmaker wanted to include my story in a project about online harassment of women. 2 different publishers had reached out about writing a book. A year ago, I was hiding my most successful achievement from everyone I cared about, I told Dylan, as we worked on business plans for our new security-focused content creation company. Now I'm being asked to share my expertise publicly. How does that feel? Terrifying, exhilarating, like I'm finally living as one complete person instead of 2 separate identities. Any regrets? I considered the question carefully. The past month had been intense, stressful, and life-changing in ways I couldn't have predicted. My privacy was gone, my family relationships had been tested, and my future looked completely different than I'd imagined. But I was also closer to my family than I'd been in years. I had a business partner who understood and supported my work. I was helping other women navigate similar challenges, and for the first time since I'd started my OnlyFans account, I could be proud of my success openly instead of secretly. No regrets, I said finally. Just gratitude that I survived long enough to figure out who I really wanted to be. The crisis with Gregory Hoffman had forced me to choose between safety through secrecy and safety through honesty. I'd chosen honesty, and while it had been more difficult and more public than I'd expected, it had also been more liberating than I'd dared to hope. I was no longer hiding my most significant accomplishment. I was no longer ashamed of work that had provided for my family and built my independence. I was no longer living in fear of discovery or judgment. I was simply Alexis Reeves, entrepreneur and content creator, speaking my truth and building my future one honest conversation at a time. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Phoenix Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 200 women entrepreneurs, and felt something I'd never experienced before: complete authenticity. No secrets, no hidden income sources, no carefully constructed lies about where my success had come from. Just me, Alexis Reeves, sharing the real story of how I'd built a 6-figure business and learned to stop apologizing for it. When I first started creating content online, I said into the microphone, I thought success meant hiding what I did well enough that no one would ever find out. Today, I want to talk about what I learned when that became impossible, and why it was the best thing that ever happened to my business. The audience was a mix of traditional entrepreneurs and women from various areas of sex work, all attending the first annual conference for alternative business models that Dylan and I had organized through our new company, Secure Creator Solutions. What had started as a security consulting firm for content creators had evolved into something much bigger: a comprehensive business support system for entrepreneurs working in stigmatized industries. I used to measure my success by how well I could compartmentalize my life, I continued. Professional Alexis did graphic design and lived paycheck to paycheck. Secret Alexis ran a thriving OnlyFans account
and supported her entire family. The exhaustion of maintaining those two identities nearly destroyed both of them. In the front row, Mom and Dad sat next to Dylan and his girlfriend Melissa. 6 months ago, the idea of my parents voluntarily attending a conference where I'd be speaking openly about sex work would have been unthinkable. Now Dad was taking notes on his phone, probably planning to share key points with his real estate colleagues who'd been asking about alternative revenue streams. Since my story had made local news, the transformation hadn't been instant or easy. There had been difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and relationships that didn't survive my newfound transparency, but there had also been unexpected support, new opportunities, and a level of peace that I'd never thought possible. The turning point came when I realized that shame was costing me more than honesty ever could. I said, I was so afraid of judgment that I was hiding my biggest accomplishment from the people who loved me most. After my keynote, I spent an hour in the networking area, talking with women who were facing similar challenges. Sarah, a cam model who was putting her daughter through college, but couldn't tell anyone in her suburban community how she afforded private school tuition. Maria, an escort who'd built a real estate investment portfolio, but couldn't explain her down payment sources to mortgage brokers. Jennifer, a phone sex operator who'd been running her own business for 5 years, but couldn't put it on her resume when applying for other jobs. How do you handle the fear? Sarah asked during our conversation. The fear that once people know, everything changes. Everything does change, I said honestly, but not always in the ways you expect. Some changes are painful, but others are incredibly freeing. What about professional consequences, future opportunities? That's real, and I won't pretend it isn't. But I've also found that being open about my work has created opportunities I never could have imagined. This conference, my consulting business, the book deal, none of that would have existed if I'd stayed hidden. The book had been another unexpected development. Hidden in Plain Sight, Building Success in Stigmatized Industries, would be published next year, co-authored with Dylan and featuring interviews with dozens of entrepreneurs who'd found success in everything from sex work to cannabis to adult entertainment. What had started as my personal story had become a broader exploration of how societal shame impacts business development and economic opportunity. The hardest part, I told Sarah, isn't other people's reactions, it's learning to stop judging yourself through their eyes. During the lunch break, I checked my phone and found a text from Natalie, watching the live stream from my doctor's appointment. You're glowing up there, so proud of how far you've come. Natalie had been my constant throughout all the changes, but even our friendship had evolved. Instead of being the only person who knew my secret, she'd become my creative collaborator, helping develop content strategies for other women transitioning from hidden to open business models. Her background in marketing had proven invaluable as we built secure creator solutions from a 2-person startup into a company with 12 employees and clients across the country. The afternoon sessions focused on practical concerns, legal structures for adult businesses, tax strategies for cash-heavy industries, and security protocols for entrepreneurs who faced heightened risk. Dylan led a workshop on digital privacy protection, while I facilitated a panel on family communication and boundary setting. My teenage kids know what I do for work now, said one of the panelists, a successful dominatrix who'd been hiding her career for 8 years. It was the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most honest. My daughter told me later that she was proud of me for being brave enough to build my own business. What about the judgment from other parents? Asked someone in the audience. Some of them are judgmental, but others are curious, and a few have quietly asked for business advice because they're struggling financially and impressed by what I've built. These were the conversations I'd never imagined having when I first created my OnlyFans account. Back then, success had meant earning enough money to feel secure while staying invisible enough to avoid consequences. Now success meant using my experience to help other women navigate similar challenges while building sustainable, honest businesses. The day's final session was a roundtable discussion about the future of stigmatized industries and changing social attitudes. We talked about generational differences, regional variations, and the slow but steady shift toward accepting sex work as legitimate labor. My grandmother was horrified when she found out what I do, shared one participant, but my college-aged niece thinks it's cool that I'm an entrepreneur. She's actually considering starting her own OnlyFans account after graduation. The conversation is changing. I said. Slowly, but it's changing. Every time one of us speaks openly about our work, every time we show up as successful business owners instead of hiding in shame, we make it a little easier for the next woman to be honest about her choices. As the conference wound down, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed, not just since Gregory Hoffman's harassment had forced me into the open, but since that morning when Dylan had confronted me about my OnlyFans account at Copper Moon Cafe. That conversation had felt like the end of everything I'd built. Instead, it had been the beginning of something much better. Dylan appeared at my elbow as I was saying goodbye to the last few attendees. Ready to call it a day? More than ready. How do you think it went? I think we just proved that there's a real need for what we're building. Did you see the registration list for next year's conference? We're already at capacity and it's 6 months away. We walked out to the parking garage together, both exhausted but energized by the day's success. Secure Creator Solutions had grown faster than either of us had anticipated, driven by demand we hadn't fully understood until we started meeting it. I have something to tell you, Dylan said as we reached our cars. Melissa and I are engaged. I stopped walking and stared at him. What? Why didn't you tell me earlier? I proposed last night. I wanted to tell you privately before we announce it to Mom and Dad. Dylan, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. There's more. She wants to join the company, full-time, not just consulting. Her marketing background and tech industry connections could really help us scale. The idea of Melissa becoming our third business partner felt right immediately. She'd been supportive of our work from the beginning, even when it meant her fiancé was building a business around sex work support services. Her professional background complemented our skills perfectly, and her perspective as someone outside the adult industry could help us reach new markets. I love it, but are you sure she knows what she's signing up for? This business will always be connected to adult work. That could impact her professional reputation too. We've talked about it extensively. She's in. Complete. She says she'd rather build something meaningful with us than climb the corporate ladder somewhere else. That evening, we celebrated Dylan's engagement at my parents' house with takeout Thai food and champagne. It was a scene that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. The whole family together openly discussing the adult business that had paid for the house we were sitting in, toasting a future that included all of us working together in our own unconventional way. I have an announcement too, I said as we finished dinner. I've decided to wind down my OnlyFans account. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just surprised. Are you sure? Dylan asked. The income is still significant. It is, but it's not growing anymore. And honestly, my passion has shifted. I'm more excited about consulting and advocacy work than I am about creating content. The OnlyFans account served its purpose, but I'm ready for something new. What will you do with your subscriber base? Mom asked, a question that would have shocked me a year ago coming from her. I'm going to be transparent about the transition, recommend other creators who might appeal to my audience, maybe create some educational content about the business side of sex work before I close the account completely. That's very ethical, Dad said, taking care of your customers even as you're changing direction. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering everything from wedding planning to business expansion to the book tour I'd be doing next year.
Normal family topics, discussed openly and honestly for the first time in years. As I drove home to my new apartment in Central Phoenix, a place I'd chosen for safety and convenience rather than secrecy, I thought about the message I'd received that afternoon from a woman named Katie, who'd watched my conference keynote online. I've been hiding my massage therapy business because I sometimes work with clients who want sensual services, she'd written. I make good money and I'm not doing anything illegal, but I've been terrified to tell my family the truth about how I can afford my lifestyle. Your talk gave me hope that honesty might actually be possible. Messages like Katie's arrived almost daily now. Women who'd found success in various forms of adult work but were exhausted by the secrecy, the judgment, and the isolation that came with operating in stigmatized industries. Women who wanted to be proud of their entrepreneurial achievements but felt trapped by social expectations and family dynamics. Each message reminded me why the work Dylan and I were doing mattered beyond our own situations. We weren't just building a business, we were creating space for other women to live authentically while protecting their safety and financial security. My phone buzzed with a text from Gregory Hoffman. Just kidding. That nightmare was behind me permanently. Gregory had served his jail sentence and moved to another state as part of his probation agreement. I'd heard through Detective Johnson that he'd been required to undergo psychological counseling and had no contact with any of his victims since his release. The real text was from Natalie. Saw the photos from the conference on social media. You looked like you were exactly where you belonged. She was right. Standing at that podium speaking openly about my work and my journey, surrounded by other women who understood the unique challenges of building businesses in stigmatized industries. I had felt like I was exactly where I belonged. A year ago, I'd measured success by how well I could hide my achievements. Now I measured it by how effectively I could help other women stop hiding theirs. The conference had been sold out. Our consulting business had a 6-month waiting list. The book proposal had attracted interest from major publishers. But the real measure of success was simpler. I could look at myself in the mirror every morning without shame, speak about my work without fear, and go to sleep every night, knowing that I was building something meaningful with people who truly knew and supported me. The crisis that had started with Dylan discovering my OnlyFans account and escalated with Gregory Hoffman's harassment had transformed every aspect of my life, my family relationships, my career trajectory, my sense of self, my daily routine. All of it had changed. But the most important change was internal. I was no longer divided between who I really was and who I thought I should be. I was no longer exhausted by the effort of maintaining separate identity. I was no longer ashamed of work that had provided financial independence and helped the people I loved. I was simply Alexis Reeves, entrepreneur, author, advocate, daughter, sister, friend, all of it real, all of it integrated, all of it mine to claim openly. The journey from secret to transparent hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every risk I'd taken along the way. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to your carefully constructed life is for it to fall apart completely, forcing you to rebuild it with honesty instead of fear. Sometimes the crisis you're trying to avoid is actually the breakthrough you desperately need. And sometimes the secret you're most afraid to tell is the truth that will finally set you free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.